Okay, we're at a new park today, Hemlock Ridge Park. I don't know, I'm thinking maybe it's in Perry. I don't exactly know. It's also only 12 minutes from my house, which is just about as far as Holden Arboretum and Penitentiary Glen, which are about 10 and 11 minutes. So this is the new park that I talked about in previous videos, where I think they opened it last year with one trail. Now they just added another trail, and they're going to be extending the trails, maybe adding other ones as well. So this will be an interesting one to watch develop and grow over time. The only unfortunate thing, you can see these high tension electrical wires that are passing right through the park. So that's a little eerie, getting all that radiation from the wires. What's weird is sometimes I can feel that, when I pass under it, I can feel like the vibration, or hear it certainly, and feel it. So it's a little odd, but let's just hope it doesn't kill me. So yeah, you can hear the traffic a little bit, which is a little unfortunate in this particular part, but it goes deeper into the woods where it's more isolated. So that's good. What can you do? You can't totally get away from society and its trappings. But I thought this would be a cool place to come here on this Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, 10:01 right now. I wanted to be out earlier, but I have my chores, as always, just kind of keep me occupied for a while. Yeah, you can see the electrical wires that I was talking about, power lines. But still, you can hear a lot of insects chittering away in the fields. The sky isn't blue today, it's overcast, but it's a nice, I don't know, maybe 74 degrees Fahrenheit. So sort of perfect temperature. And I guess this is another reason why I felt like today I would come here. On the really blue sky days, I like to be, out in the open. And I guess on days like this, it kind of leads me more towards that Mother Earth energy that I talked about yesterday. Getting into the womb of Mother Earth here in these trails, which you do feel like you're doing. You're surrounded by dense vegetation. And since it's a new park, it's more natural, I guess, more wild. This is the word I was looking for, less cultivated. So more in its natural state. And being surrounded by that, you can just feel that, like the vines and the thickets and whatever that are over there, the bushes, are fairly unwalkable because, they've been there a long time. This is an old, not old, this is in centuries, but, whatever. I'm sure this was cleared. These are not old growth trees or anything, but they're trees. So it's taken a while, maybe 100 years or so, for it to get to this point. And so you get to see or feel more of that ancient energy a little bit, the more timeless energy, which is nice. But then interspersed with that, what I kind of like about this is there is a nice trail here, nicely groomed. You can see the bridge in front of us that is new. Everything's new. The benches are new, and you just get that sense that it's well taken care of because of that. I'm sure as time goes by, they won't be able to keep everything new, but a lot of the parks I go to, most of the parks I go to, are not new, and they have that weathered, worn look, which is also good, because it also tells you that it's been there a while. It has staying power. But there's something nice about newness, new things that are born. So this is like a park being born, and we're sort of witnessing it. So a good place to come and talk about things such as that, such as every day being a fresh new day, and starting fresh every day, which I think is one of the most important things to do. I think we've talked about this before, is not carrying the past around with you. It's like the past is like a heavy backpack that you have on your back, that if you don't get rid of it, it weighs you down and makes it harder for you to move through life. And I don't have a backpack on right now. These trails aren't long enough for me to need any sort of water or supplies or anything like that. So I just come out free and clear, nothing weighting me down, with a sense of exploration and newness. Just I'm always excited about seeing what every day holds. Every day being a new day. Every walk being a new walk, even if it's in the same park. It's never the same. It's always different. And every day is seeing that newness in every moment. Not getting bored, right? Not saying, oh, I need something new and exciting. I need to go somewhere new. Which is one of the reasons I'm fine with going to Holden Arboretum every day. It's right by me. As I said last time, it feels new to me every day, no matter what. And every day it's a little different. I should note, I have some bug lotion on. Not the typical DEET kind, which I don't like. I have something called picaridin. Picaridin, I believe is how it's spelled. Close enough that you'd find it. I highly recommend it. I don't like the smell of DEET. I don't like the feel of DEET. And this is used in Europe. For some reason, it's not just on the shelves here. If you walk into Target or Walmart, maybe it's at Walmart, I don't know. It's not at Target. And the few stores that I tried finding it at once, but I found it on Amazon. And so I buy it off of Amazon. It's a little on the pricier side, but there's a number of advantages. For one, it keeps mosquitoes off, but also ticks, and also most of the biting flies. And I say most because there's one particular fly that for some reason still likes to bite me when I have this on, and I'm at Holden and I go through the trails. I don't know if it's the same dang fly every time, or if it's just a different one of the same kind, but it doesn't seem to bother him that I have this lotion on. And sometimes I find him attached to my skin, as I'm going through there, and I gently try to extricate him, or her, I guess, I don't know. But other than that, it works really well, and it does work against a lot of biting flies. Like I used to go to the beach and have all these little flies on me, and with this stuff I notice a great reduction in the number of those sorts of flies. So these are just sort of the practical things that I want to mention to get out of the way, because of course these things still matter. It's good when you're walking through a forest like this, which is where the bugs come out, that you have some protection against the mosquitoes and the bugs, of course. And I like to do it in as humane a way as possible. Just keep them away, and this stuff seems to work. So there's that. So I feel like I'm prepared for the day. It's getting noisy as we're getting closer to the freeway, which I think that's Route 90 right there that we're getting close to. It's the freeway that I had to take to get here. From my house, I had to take 90 west and then get off at Vrooman Road, which is an interesting road because there's many, and I guess I didn't notice, there's like 5 different parks that as you get off that exit, there's these brown signs pointing left and right to 5 different parks. This park, Hemlock Ridge, Indian Point, north and south, or 2 entrances. I guess I don't know if it's north and south. I think it is. 2 entrances for Indian Point, which is also a park we need to go to. A place called Hidden Lake. There's another park called Hidden Lake, which also is nice. And I think Payne Falls may have been the last one. Although that's, yeah, I guess maybe it is. All in this general area, so I forget sometimes how many different parks there are. This is, I don't know if you can tell, but we're going down a gravelly trail that has a fairly steep incline, so hopefully I don't slip here. If the camera goes crazy, that's what's happening. It's got a definite, very steep incline to it. We get down to a little bridge here and then go up the other side, equally steep. And then we're getting along to the forested areas where the noise settles down and hopefully the mind settles down as well. I guess we're kind of getting the superficial things out of the way here first before we go into any deep exploration, which I do want to do, because to me, every day I thought of an unexamined life is not worth living. That phrase just popped into my head, that quote, and I don't remember who said that. Maybe Plato, Aristotle, I don't recall. But the one thing that was in my mind today that I thought we would use as a starting point for our inquiry is the quote, "Know thyself," by Socrates. I think it was Socrates, maybe it was Plato. I'm getting old. Pretty sure it was Socrates. And I think that's what all of this is about. I mean, every bit of what we've been doing here has, at its purpose, if there is any purpose to it, to know yourself. But what does that mean? And this is why we need to inquire. Because at face value, those words could mean a lot of things. And we don't mean probably most of those things. The way we're taking here, our approach, right, which is to not accumulate knowledge. So the word know right off the bat is probably the wrong word, because know implies knowledge. We could probably rephrase that to be aware of yourself, or be aware, right? I think, now we've transformed a perfectly good quote into something else, but there's reasons for that. One is, what is the self? And I guess these are just showing there's different ways we could go here, but we'll go straight for now. There's different ways to go about this, but it's also good to go into the words. What do words mean? Because how do we communicate at all without knowing the meaning of words? There has to be some shared understanding of meaning, or using words would mean nothing at all. And even as they stand, using words means very little. One reason being, words are imprecise. Words are incomplete, but also I could use the word know and it could mean something different than how you see the word know. And if we don't come to an agreement about what that word means, and even then, how do we come to an agreement? That's a whole nother issue. We never can come to complete agreement. Words are imprecise things. It's the reason that truth can't be expressed in words, because they're open to interpretation. They are uncertain. They are incomplete. They're just representations of imperfect pictures and ideas and concepts in our head. So flawed in every way. Flawed. And when something is flawed, so we have a choice, left or right. I guess we'll go left at this point. This loops around, so wherever we go, we'll come back. So there is that. There is just the fallibility of words. We've beaten that to death endlessly. Not that we couldn't do it again, but I guess we'll just say we recognize the imperfection of language, of words, of concepts, of ideas, of creations of the mind, creations of thought, of every shape and kind. And we'll just start there. So that doesn't put us off on a good foot, because to know thyself then in with words or concepts means we never really know ourselves, because of that imperfection of knowledge being impartial and complete. So again, so much follows from the insight that knowledge, in the way we traditionally think of it, as the accumulation of memory from experiences that becomes knowledge. And since experience is limited, memory is limited, knowledge is limited, and therefore can never understand the whole. And we are after the whole here. That's one thing that we are after. We are not seeking partial explanations. We're not seeking analysis of any particular problem, any particular aspect of human nature or the mind. We're not just picking out fear, say, and spending our life examining fear, because as we talked about before, these are like branches of a tree, and you could spend a lifetime trimming the branches of a tree and never getting to the root, the trunk, the trunk, and then going down into the ground, right, the root of the problem. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to just spend our time trimming branches. We want to get to the root of it all. And I think we find that there's not enough time in the universe to get to the root of it all through any process of analysis, because it takes time and it's incomplete, and we only live so long, right? I mean, our lifespan is short, and we don't want to wait 30, 50 years. Not to mention, what do we expect after 20, 30 years of accumulating knowledge? One day we're just going to get it? I mean, it's possible, but it's not a result of that knowledge. Insight, as we talked about, is what is required. That occurs in a flash, not as a result of accumulating knowledge. It comes from some other place, from some other origin. It's not directly causally related to the accumulation of knowledge. You can have insight with no knowledge, just by observing the world with your senses, and not through this accumulation of concepts and ideas. So there's all this, right? We can unravel that. I mean, we went down a few tributaries and paths there, winding our way around to the point where the word know, meaning the accumulation of knowledge, is not the way we're discussing it here. There's a different way of knowing that is not the accumulation of knowledge. We've talked about that as being direct perception, pure observation, awareness, choiceless awareness, seeing things without thought coming into play. That's sort of the key. Can we see without thought? Can we observe without thought? Can we be aware without thought? Because thought brings in all the illusions. Thought corrupts, especially thoughts about me. This whole identity that I have. When that pattern exists, the identity of me, there is no love. There is no real understanding, because it's so small and focused on one part, you, not seeing the whole. And love is the whole, right? Love is when you love your neighbor as yourself, right? That's not you. So, like, even if you just took the golden rule and just examined it, you see that love is about others, right? But it's also not about doing things to achieve some benefit for yourself either. That's not love. If you do something because you want a reward, even the feeling of satisfaction at doing that thing, then you're still acting out of selfishness, out of the ego, the me. And this is what it means to know ourselves, to recognize how is it we do things, or why we do certain things, to observe that behavior, to observe what we do and why we do it. And now, right, in our current state of affairs, our current daily, petty, miserable little life that we live, suffering, filled with suffering and fear and anxiety and depression and all the other problems that plague humanity, that is our current reality, right? And what maybe we talked about the difference between reality and truth, but what is the truth? Which is not that reality that we have currently constructed from the mind and live in. Whichever reality, take your pick. Could be a religious reality, political reality, scientific reality, whatever house of cards you have built up using the brain is the reality you currently live in. And it's normally a house of idea cards, right? Every card being an idea, and we construct this very fragile, subject to decay, not true house of cards, and then we live in it. And we wonder when the wind comes by and blows it down, we suffer all sorts of trauma because we thought cards was our security when in fact it wasn't. And at some point in time, you realize that about whatever ideology or religion or even scientific approach you take to life that is based on thoughts and ideas, there will come a time when you will see the fallibility of it. And often this leads to doubt. This then leads to there's nothing, or it leads to nihilism, or you switch religions, you switch ideologies. You see the fallibility in one system of thought and you think, well, I just need to find the right system of thought. And you pick another. Well, then you're just repeating the cycle. You will eventually, if you live long enough, right? Probably you'll just die before you reach this point, but if you live long enough, you'll find that system was incomplete as well. Had its limitations and wasn't correct. And you can either spend a lifetime reaching that point where what you believed in, what you thought was true, turns out not to be true, and start again, or reach a point where you realize, I need to put all that down. The sooner you realize that, the better. The sooner you realize that all systems of thought, regardless of where they come from or whatever it is, are the same in that they originate from the same thought process that all belief systems or ideologies originate from. Right, and this is part of knowing ourselves. We're going into who we are now and what motivates us now and what keeps us going and what is our belief system and how do we operate today. Today's Sunday. Maybe you're going to church, or you will go to church, or you have gone to church. Why do you do that? What motivates you to do that? Is it fear? Fear of dying and not having any place to go? Fear of ending? The physical body's going to end, but you'd like to think that there's something permanent that continues. And maybe you feel like if you do certain things, you appease your concept of God, which is just a concept, an idea that you have of God. But if you appease that concept of God, somehow you might go to a better place or a different place, or when you die, or be reborn if you don't believe in God, in reincarnation or rebirth, but you want to be reborn into some other body or why would you want to be reborn? Like into what? All living things suffer. This is the common, the nature of everything is that everything suffers. Every living thing, every conditioned entity, anything that is born must die, right? And in the meantime, they're suffering. This is the truth the Buddha saw, dukkha. Unsatisfaction or suffering, whatever you want to call it, is just hand in hand with life. You can't live without suffering. You can't unwind or untangle the suffering from living, which was sort of his key insight. And that if you understand that, understand the suffering, understand who you are now, then you're not yearning to be someplace else, because there's no other place you can be that is going to be without that suffering. If you realize that suffering is universal, right? It's universal, but there's a cause to the suffering. And if you can identify the cause, and go into it, and then perhaps that suffering can end in your lifetime, right? Rather than waiting for another life. If you understand what's happening now in your mind and in your body that causes this, and instead of hoping for some future where there is no suffering, which is mostly what we're doing, understand who you are right now in this moment, suffering and all. The reality of what is, not wishing that it was any different, that there was an end to suffering, just understanding what is suffering. Why do you suffer? Who suffers? Because then you get back to the who am I? In the know yourself, who's the you? Who's the yourself? Who's the self that suffers? Go into that. Because search for that and see what that self is that suffers. And why does it suffer? Because if you understand that, perhaps there's an end to suffering through that understanding, the very nature of what suffering is. Not wanting it to end, but understanding it as it is, as it currently is. Here's one of the lookout points, which are kind of nice. Just look out, the Grand River's down there somewhere. There's a pretty steep, we're up high on a ridge, so it goes down pretty steeply, pretty suddenly. I don't want to get too close to the edge, but you can see here. So, I mean, you're alive now. This is your life. Why wish for another life? You know, whether that other life is, it's simply because you're not understanding your current life and what it is. Because if you understood that, you wouldn't wish for another life. You wouldn't wish for some place to go after you die. It's because you just don't understand the here and now, the what is, everything that's happening to you. You've not gone into it. You've not understood it. And because of that lack of understanding, you wish for something else. Some place of peace where there is no such suffering. But, you know, go into that. Why? You yearn for something that likely doesn't exist. But somehow that makes you feel better. But it's like, instead of that, see what really is. See what is, right? And this is the uncorrupted seeing of who you are now, of what you are, body, mind, all of it. Not the part of it, not examining just your foot, you know, but like all of you in your entirety. Who are you? You know, what is this entity that believes that they are a separate entity from everything else? Like, that's where you should go. Because in that, if you have the insight of who you are and see yourself completely and wholly, suffering can turn into passion. Right? There's an energy in suffering. Suffering can turn into passion. And one thing's for sure, when there's suffering, there's no love. Which is something else that one can see, because suffering is all about me, my suffering. Right? So it reinforces that identity that prevents love. And, you know, suffering a lot of times is self-pity, you know, depending on what type of suffering is it. It's, you know, maybe you're suffering because of a breakup or something. And that's all about you and your feelings and your individual, you know, how I am. And, you know, I say that and someone may be offended and say, well, yes, what's wrong with me and what's wrong with my feelings? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with any of it. But are you seeing why you are suffering? And are you seeing who the me is that is suffering? Because go into it. While you're suffering, use that opportunity to observe it. What's happening? Why is there suffering? And maybe if you go into it, you'll see because you want something you don't have, or you have something you don't want. It's usually one of the two. There's something you want. So again, wanting and desire means there's a you, a tiny little you, in there, a collection, a bundle of memories that wants something, like maybe a person. But you can't have that person. That person doesn't like you, doesn't want a relationship, whatever. You want that relationship. So you suffer because you can't get what you want. That sounds very selfish to me. Another way of suffering could be you have something you don't want. So maybe, you know, you're in a situation in your life where you wish you lived somewhere else, you wish you were someone else, you had a different profession, different relationships, It's very similar to wanting, desiring. It's really desiring to not have things or to have different things. So, there's also physical suffering, which is pain. And this is one that's hard to deal with because there is physical pain, but there's also mental pain on top of that physical pain. Physical pain is there and is a sensation, and it's caused by some disruption in the functioning of the organism from its intended purpose. But this happens with living things. I mean, things don't always work as intended and as perfection. And so just acknowledging that is an inevitable part of living, that there is pain, and to see that pain and go into that physical pain and going into it and saying, why does that cause me to suffer? Why does physical pain even cause me to suffer? Maybe if you go into that, you'll understand pain in such a way that it doesn't become this overriding force in your life. It's more the emotional pain that we have trouble dealing with, not the physical pain. I'll mention again that certain people who we could call enlightened, there's examples of them. Buddhists, thinking not Ajahn Chah, his teacher. Also Krishnamurti, who I talk about a lot. Well, I'll just use Krishnamurti first. Used to have dental surgery done without anesthetic because he was very sensitive. He was a very sensitive person. And any anesthetic or medicine, you had to be used in really small amounts, and he couldn't get anesthetic because it was too harsh on his system. So he had dental work done, and there was pain. There was physical pain, but he did it. It was over. And of course, we don't, not being him, know exactly what it was, but I think you can, from the outside looking in, say he knew how to deal with physical pain in such a way that there was pain, and then there was an end to pain, right, when it was over. And you don't dwell on it. You don't worry and say, oh, what's going to happen? I don't want that pain to come back, because that's fear, right? Fear is when we may experience pain in the moment, and then we don't want it to come back. And that's fear, which is not the pain itself. It's like a secondary pain on top of the first one that doesn't need to be there. If you understood fear and pain and whatnot, and see pain as a part of life, a natural part of life, then it's all just there. And you don't fear it, you deal with it when it's there, and then when it's done, you're done with it, put it down. And it's just that how you approach life and how you approach these things matters. And that when you have a clear mind, a mind that understands these things for what they are, you're not seeking an end to pain. Pain is there. There's nothing you can do. And you deal with it, and then it's over, and then you move on. And if it comes back, it does, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And it's just the nature of living. It's part of being alive. And the pain goes hand in hand with being alive. So that's just something to consider. That as we observe ourselves in our life and all parts of it, what we may consider good and bad, and understand all those parts, the good and bad, there is an understanding of the whole. And again, it's not just the parts that we want to understand here. It's the whole. Our whole being, who we are. So we talked about this. How do we know ourselves? Because I think all of this relies on us knowing ourselves, not by accumulating knowledge, but by observing who we are in this moment without the past interfering. And this is key, because we tend to accumulate knowledge, and then we see what's happening in this present moment through that knowledge that we have accumulated. Whether that knowledge comes from years ago, comes from a minute ago, a second ago, that some past knowledge we accumulate, and that biases or changes how we see or perceive what's happening now. We see it through that lens, always through like a dirty lens of the past. We don't see what's happening now without that. And that is what to see. Can we see that? Can we see that that is how we see now? That's not seeing clearly when you see through the lens of the past and let knowledge interfere. And so many people talk about the now, be present in the now, here and now, whatever you might say, but that's a word. And you can say, well, I'm aware of now. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm looking out at the trees, and I'm thinking that those are trees. I have memories of trees, so the image I recognize as trees. I recognize a fence, dirt, insects crawling around in the dirt, twigs, the gravel under my feet. I mean, could go on and on, right? The sky, clouds, but notice I'm naming everything. So everything that I see, I'm giving a name, which means I'm not really seeing, I'm seeing the name that I'm giving things. Because often when you give it a name, you move on, so I say, oh, there's a tree. I've seen enough, I know what it is, move on. Am I really looking at that tree? Am I looking at the branches, the leaves, the light on the tree, the color of green, the different shades of green, the blackness between the trees, the ending of one tree, the beginning of another, or the fact that I can't tell the difference between the trees? I see birds flying around the trees, the wind is blowing the branches, and even more than that, I mean, words, I could use many, many words here, but it's only getting to the point that there's much more there than what you might see at first. So just something to be aware of. Alright, so I moved a little bit around here to give other people an opportunity to take in that view while we continue on our walking journey. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting where the thought process goes when you just sort of let it go, let it do what it's going to do without interfering. And it's taken us a lot of places here today, by not by my will. I'm not intending where this conversation goes. It ends up somewhere, and then we go on that, and we go on that, and we started with inquiry. And of course, inquiry can mean many things. It can be self-inquiry, which is sort of what we're doing here, but not quite, because there's also dialogue, which I was going to mention, and this is more of a dialogue, even though it's a monologue. But I am imagining, right, speaking to somebody, and that the words I say will be listened by somebody, maybe one person out there in the universe, or none, which is fine. Because the process of inquiry in the mind is the same, in that we're posing a question, we're examining the question, we're going into the question, because the question contains the answer. Just like a flower that blooms. But not when you reach a conclusion too quickly, right? If you reach a conclusion too quickly, you're done. And this is like what we were talking about before I got up over there, was that you see something, and if you immediately just dismiss it, you classify it as a tree, as whatever, and then you move on, you miss seeing that tree. Do you ever really see that tree? That tree, there's no other tree like that anywhere in the universe than that tree right there. But when you label it as a tree and move on, you never saw the tree. Reminds me of there's a Buddhist story that I'll mangle and won't get right, but about a student who went to see a great Buddhist master, and he had, in order to reach the master, he had to walk through the front gate and go down this path and go deep into the innards of the monastery to reach the master who is sitting there meditating in a grand pose, and he's hoping to learn great knowledge and great understanding from this master. And he reaches the master after a longer walk through the entranceway and through the courtyard, and to reach the master, which is where he wanted to be. And then he says, Master, I'm seeking knowledge, and I'm seeking, I want you to help me find ultimate truth, and however he phrased it. And then the master said, did you see the cherry blossom tree on the pathway as you walked in? And then the aspiring student said, no, I didn't see it. He's like, then we're done here. And that's it, because what the point is, if we don't see what's around us all the time because our mind is on something else. So in this case, the student's mind was on reaching his destination, and not on paying attention to what is around, right? Not on paying attention to what's happening around him. And he missed seeing truth, which is that which is around, that cherry blossom tree as he passed it. And if he was aware, right? The student was not aware of his surroundings, and the whole lesson there is there's nothing that the master can teach that student that the student can't teach himself if he was just aware. So the greatest lesson there is you don't learn truth from another. You learn it by observing this world around us. And that's all you need if you go in deeply enough, right? If you just pass by that tree, as I'm doing right now, passing by a lot of trees without seeing them because I'm talking and I'm distracted. But I'm going into this because seeing this is so important. Seeing what we do now that is not pure awareness, that is not paying attention or choiceless awareness. We're superficially observing things as we pass by, as we talk. But there's an importance to that as well, because this is what we always do. See what we always do. See the disorder in our life that comes about by us not observing things well enough, carefully enough, closely enough, deeply enough, however you want to put it. That's what creates a lot of the chaos in our life that wouldn't be there if we understood our life, understood everything, right, from a whole perspective. So this goes back to suffering, passion, love. There is no love when we suffer. We suffer because we don't pay attention to our own life to know why we are suffering, and to understand and see ourselves clearly. And when we see clearly, then there's an understanding of suffering. It's not that, and whether it stays or goes, or what, it undergoes a transformation, right, is maybe a better way of saying it. It transforms into passion, which we could say is an energy that is not lust, not desire. It's an energy, right? We're not talking about silencing, becoming like a stone, where you're lifeless and unmoving. It's about being alive, but being fully alive, not partly alive. Most people are like zombies. They're only partly alive, going through day to day, just superficially seeing things. I mean, it's probably a good analogy, because zombies have like this lesser awareness, right? There's some sort of life in them, but they don't see the world the same way. You can only imagine how they see the world, but in the same way, most people don't see the world either. They suffer from limited awareness. And if you sit and meditate with the intention of closing yourself off from the rest of the world, like you know, sitting in a dark room in a corner, completely silent, away from everything else, hoping that your mind goes into some transcendental state. It may very well, but that transcendental state is not your daily life. You'll come out of that state, then what? So your mind goes into some state, big deal. The brain is a machine. It has altered states. There's nothing mysterious about that. It can go through all these different perceptual states, some of which, you know, there's these states called the jhanas, which are deep meditative states that I actually studied for a while until I realized that that wasn't the way, right? Because you're trying to achieve something, and as long as you try to achieve something, you're never going to see truth, because achievement is driven by the ego, which is the very thing that needs to not be there to see truth. So it's the conundrum, right? It is the you know, as long as you're trying to achieve something, the me or the self is very strong in you. The force is strong in you. The force that drives your personal ambitions, your personal drive, whatever it is that you want to achieve in life and accomplish, all of which, by the way, will go away when you're dead, right? You can't take any of it with you. I mean, we understand these, right? I use these phrases. I've heard these phrases for my whole life. What's funny is there's truth in them that no one or most people are afraid to see. They joke about things like that, like, well, you can't take it with you. And, well, at first there's an implication that you're going somewhere else, right? But if we say we can't take it with you, what do we think we do take with us? Our memories? So we can't take money, but we can take our memories? I mean, no, you can't take anything with you. You end, right? This entity, this individual entity composed of this body, this brain, these memories that have been accumulated, and all the personal wealth and relationships, it ends. Like, that is a truth that can be seen, right? But you don't want to see that truth because you don't want to end. You don't want to accept that. You want to come up with some idea. The brain wants to play tricks with you and invent concepts about, you know, not ending. Everything you see in the real world ends. In this physical world that we are at, everything ends, including you. You've seen people that have passed away laying in a coffin, and you see that they're motionless anymore, right? And their body is decaying, and their brain, as part of that body, which contained all the memories they accumulated their entire lifetime, right, is stored in your brain. Without that brain, you wouldn't have those memories. And so why do you hold on to that? Why do you hold on to something you can't take with you? You know? So in some sense, like, what is there, you know, by just going into that and seeing really, truly, right? Even in Christianity, if you saw ashes to ashes and dust to dust, I mean, of course, Christianity promotes the idea of a soul. There's a butterfly here that looks like it could be in distress. Or maybe it's just fluttering around. Circling around me. I love butterflies. You know, that's happening right now, right? The butterfly, like, do we see that butterfly, right? And I could just walk by these things and not pay attention to them, but I am paying attention, even while I'm talking. Maybe not as much as I normally would, but, like, these are the things you don't want to miss. The butterfly, you know, that just flies in front of you, the bird, the birds that are singing now in the trees, right? I don't need to take this with me. I don't need to accumulate this as memories. This is what's happening now. And this, to get back to that, right? Because I guess we were headed just towards an explanation of death again, which is the ending of everything. You know, and to just go into that a little, to see that if everything ends, this death that we say is far in the future, right? Where everything is ending. Everything certainly is going to end, right? I mean, well, they say there's only two sure things in life, death and taxes. And taxes are an unfortunate reality of life, right? Death is the end of taxes, even. So, and it's at the end of all your suffering too, right? It's the end of all your anxiety, your depression. I mean, it's the end of everything. The good, the bad, the memories, like everything that you thought you were, and that's it, you thought you were these things, ends. And there's no arguing with death, right? There's no debating it. There's no, oh, I just want to live one more day. I mean, when your time comes, it comes. But instead of seeing death as this far away, scary thing, if you see the implications of death, death is is very intimately tied to beauty and love. And you may not think that because you run away from death, right? You run away from it because you're scared. If you're not scared of death, if you don't fear it and you understand it, it becomes intimately intertwined with beauty and love, because everything's dying, all the time, so that new life can be born. There's a beauty. Death is just a natural part of life, and death is an ending, right? And if all your memories, all your pain, like all your pain and suffering right now is caused by memories, if you could end the past now that's causing you all this mental anguish, there would be beauty, and you would be able to see the world right now. It's what it is. It's obscuring beauty, right? All the suffering in your life is obscuring. We said earlier, you can't love when you're suffering. Why is that? Because love gets in the or suffering gets in the way of seeing the beauty of life. And when the suffering is out of the way, you see the beauty of life, of all life, not just you, your limited little self. You're worried about your limited little petty existence when all this is around you all the time, living and doing its thing, and you're not seeing it because all you're concerned about is the survival of this petty little being that you call yourself, and you're missing everything else. And everything else is love. You're missing it. So if there was an ending of the me, death to the me, now, not in the future, not at some distance point, but an ending of this me, which is who you are, right? Death is an ending of that me. But if there's an ending of that me now, then you can see the beauty of life and the beauty of love in the present moment without, you're still being physically alive. I mean, we're not talking suicide or anything like that. We're just talking about the ending of this thought pattern in your mind, which comes to an end in death along with the physical body and everything else. But you can truly live. Like, death to that pattern allows you to live. So this is the irony of it all, right? That death can actually mean life, true living. We don't want to see that because we're just afraid. But allow that me to die. Allow that self-centered bundle of memories that just is always afraid, anxious, depressed, whatever negative emotion, and also occasionally experiences joy and all these other things, happiness to some extent, not for very long though, usually, because something comes along to destroy it, because it's all based on pain and pleasure, which all are temporary phenomena, which are really not the same as joy, which is sort of is ever present and not based on pleasure, right? There's a different bliss or joy at the ending of the me, that you can't want that, because if you want that, then you're right back in the same game. But the death of the me, the death of this identity that you've built up, this bundle of memories that takes selfish action almost all the time, because every thought you have almost is an expression of selfishness. End that, right? End that, and something else may arise, right? Something else may arise at the ending of that. And you may truly see what living is all about, what real living in the moment is, rather than that being just a bunch of words. Living in the moment means not hanging on to the past. And the past is you. You are the past. So the only way you can live in the moment is to not have that past dragging you down. And that past is that bundle of memories that you have accumulated. That's all the past is. It's memories. So you can't eliminate those memories from your brain in a physical way, but you can just see that for what it is and not let that past interfere, right? It has its place. You know, the art of living is putting everything in its right place. And the past and memory and knowledge has a place. It shouldn't be the dominant factor in your life. It's useful as a tool, you know, that can be picked up and used and put down, but that tool should not run your life. That tool should not be used when it's not necessary. And it's not necessary to understand yourself. The past is not necessary to know who you are now. To know who you are now, you have to have no interference from the past. None. And even a remembrance of a minute ago, a second ago, interferes with your seeing the now, seeing what's happening now in this moment, from moment to moment, but not hanging on to any moment. That's a different way. And, you know, there's no way to talk ourselves into that, but to be sort of observant and aware of what is happening now, completely devoid of any past knowledge, then all time ends, right? Because there's no past, present, future, because those are all projections of the mind. There's only now, right? But not a now that is described in terms of words. It is just what is. You finally see what is truly, not through a distorted lens of the past or even of the future, which is just the projection of the past through the present into the future, because the future is nothing but the past moving forward, right? Anything that happened to you in the past, you want it to happen again, or you anticipate something happening. It's only because you have a memory of that thing that you anticipate. So the future is also just a projection of the mind. There really is none. So it's hard for me to even know sometimes where we are. I pause it temporarily because people are walking by and I don't feel like they want to be in on this inquiry, and you know, probably would look at me fairly strangely, maybe rightly so, out here talking to myself ostensibly. And of course they see the camera in my head and probably realize I'm doing something weird. Either way, abnormal. You don't typically see someone walking around these parts with a camera stuck to their head. But you know, we were talking about death and the end of the me and love coming about from the ending of this self-centeredness, and you know, you can only capture a glimpse of that without it really happening, because but there's something to be said about the words we're using. There's some pale reflection of truth, right, to these words that you can see. You know, you should use logic and reason up to a point, right? But it can only go so far, and to see the limitations of that. But what we're saying here, right, is it's pretty clear that most of the suffering of our life is a result of this me, this identity that we have built up, that we're trying to protect constantly, that we're trying to fulfill desires and avoid pain and suffering. And most of our thoughts and actions are just related to that. This is why, as long as that me is there, everything is about the me, right? And this is why, you know, when you see somebody that's self-centered other than yourself, right, it's harder to see it in yourself than in others. They talk about themselves all the time. They, you know, they're not so, maybe they don't ask you questions about how you're doing and how your day is going. And it just, you see that and you say, what a self-centered person, right? Because they're just all about them. What's wrong, what they don't like, what they like. They're constantly suffering because of something, complaining about something, right? And so, but do you see that in yourself? That when you're talking about yourself and what you want and don't like, and if that's all you do you think about others? Do you think about other people's suffering, right? Is it easy for you to not care about someone suffering in another a family, state, country, you know, wherever, nationality, race? Like, do you have a division somewhere that you care about what's on one side of that division, but not on the other side of that division? So back to division, we talked about this the other day, but it's also dividing, right? Because to have a me, you have to divide yourself between me and not me, right? There's a me and there's a not me. And if you didn't have that division, again, it's this me is caused by division. This is why when we talk about like the ending of the me, it's not death. It's the ending of these divisions, these mental divisions that we create between the me and everything else. So it's not the ending of the me, it's the ending of this division, you could say, between me and everything else. You now all of a sudden are part of everything. Not part of everything, you are everything. There isn't where me ends and everything else begins. Right? The idea of a me just dissolves. But this is what I think people don't understand. It's not everything goes black, or people are afraid of like, wow, that means death. And it's like, yes, it is death of the me, which should die, because that self-centered bundle of memories is the cause of all your pain and suffering. And by the way, the cause of all sorts of other people's pain and suffering. If that ended, this world would not be at war. This world, we would not be fighting each other. We would be helping each other. We would be seeing the beauty of this world as it is, not destroying the beauty of this world for our selfish desires. Not destroying the environment. Not the environment, it's Mother Earth, right? We use the right words, and we think of environment as something separate from us. It is us. Like, we can't live without things growing in the land, without clean water to drink, without clean air to breathe. And I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, that's a fact, right? You must understand that. You need clean water. You need clean air to breathe. You need food that isn't filled with toxins. We all should be able to agree with that. What we might not agree on is that if human activity is causing that or not, right? There's debate about that, whether, we're too concerned about human activity. And, that's where I always see the division being. Like, some people believe, you can't argue with the fact that temperatures are changing, right? And the air temperatures, atmosphere temperature is warming. That's a measured trend. But what some people say, well, it's a natural trend of the Earth. We've gone through ice ages, we've gone through this, we've gone through that. To a certain extent, that's plausible until you collect more evidence, right? And this is where belief is important, because you do need to observe the world and observe it. Don't just end there. Say, well, just because there's an ice age, nothing different is happening now. Well, that's your conclusion that you reach with limited evidence. Be open to receive more evidence, open to the truth that will come about through more observation of the world. And it's pretty clear to me that we are changing the environment. There's enough information to say humans are affecting this planet, and if we don't do something about it, we will destroy it. And we're also fighting each other in wars, and in so many ways doing many harmful things. If we weren't so self-centered, so egotistical, so me versus you, America first and everybody else last, then perhaps we would see that we need to take care of this planet. These are real problems that need to be solved. Not argue about whether it is a problem or not, but accept that there are problems. Let's try to solve these problems together, right? And not end our life. And this is why I say the ending of the me is not the ending of your life. It's probably the beginning of your life, right? I mean, I don't want to use the word born again, but in some sense, it is that. It is a new you, right? Because then there's a new you every moment. Because you're not holding on to the old you, which is the me, that accumulation that you've built up. You are now fresh and clean. Every day is fresh. Every moment is new. You are new in every moment. You are not afraid of dying because you're dying every minute, every second. You're not holding on to anything. Because if you're not holding on to anything, there's nothing to worry about losing and death. Because you're already free from all these attachments. You're free from everything that you're afraid of losing. If you're not attached to these things, what are you afraid of losing? Even attached to yourself. Because that's the biggest attachment of all. You may not care about personal belongings. You may have none. You may live in a cave. You may have nothing, very little possessions, maybe a robe and a begging bowl. But if you're still attached to your own existence, to your own sense of self, then you are still attached. Or you're still attached to one idea. You know, let's take Buddhism as an example, right? Because, you know, in some way you might say, well, Buddhism's pretty great. It's got a lot of, you know, cool things. I thought the same thing. And I studied Buddhism for many years. Until I realized that whatever the Buddha said, which at its heart seemed very simple to me, became, again, a complex set of rituals, mantras, meditative practices. You have all these different Buddhist traditions. It's almost as if no one in Buddhism really understands what the Buddha said. Because they built up these traditions, once again, wear the robes, do this, do that. There's all the suttas, and it's like more of the same. You know, the Buddha was about freeing yourself from everything and seeing truth for yourself, being a light to yourself. You know, like his last words, you know, strive on with diligence. You know, be your own light, be your own teacher. All conditioned things come to an end. You know, were his last words. And he so often said, be a light to yourself and don't rely on the truth of others, right? He had to find truth for himself by sitting under the Bodhi tree. He didn't learn it from any masters. He did all that. We've said this before, but he did all that. It didn't lead anywhere because he was simply following the practices of another. But then he took it upon himself to free himself from all of that and just sit under a tree and just examine himself, right? Not through the instructions of another, but just through his own observation. And in that observation, who knows? But that is what we need to do. I mean, I can't say what happened with the Buddha. It's all stories. So I can't say what happened. I don't know what happened. But what I can say is the freeing of the mind from the past, from that I know as a fact is what needs to happen. And I don't need to look back to any religious tradition. I shouldn't even mention the Buddha. I shouldn't mention anything from the past because it doesn't matter. Don't need it. It's not necessary. We don't need to make connections between what we're talking about and any past, because that again holds us, even if it's, well, I guess where I was going with that was that person with the robe and the begging bowl. They may have given up everything in their life except for the one idea they hold on to. Say the Buddha. They want to be a Buddha or a bodhisattva or enlightened being. That one idea they're still holding on to. They may have given up everything else, but they still have one idea. And all it takes is that one idea to be attached to that one idea. You can't be attached to anything, including that idea of enlightenment or being free or whatever you want to call it, will still hold you back. So free from everything, every idea, every concept, so that you can know yourself in this moment. Right? To just go back to what does it mean to know yourself? It can't be about accumulating knowledge. It can't be about studying your body biologically and learning about it. That is knowing something, but it is not the knowing that we're talking about here. There is a usefulness to medical biological knowledge. But when you're trying to understand yourself psychologically, who you are, mentally, right? Not physically, but as an entity that has awareness and consciousness, right? And you want to know, what is that consciousness? What is that entity? That's what we're talking about here. So knowing yourself is not the physical self, although you could learn about the physical self, and that's great. And through that, understand that you are a temporary physical being that's transitory and not permanent. But you have to go beyond that to the mind, to know the mind, because your self, that idea of self, is in the mind, not in the physical body. The physical body, we know, decays. We don't know about the mind. And it's that ignorance of, does the mind decay? Do memories decay? Does this idea of self that I have, is that permanent or not? So you have to examine that, because if you don't, then you believe that the body decays and dies, so ashes to ashes, dust to dust, physically. But you believe that you're a soul that continues somehow, right? And examine that. Now, some people will say, I know that's a fact, I believe that, I 100% know that's true. And if you close yourself off to observation in that way, then there's nothing that can be done. But if you open yourself to inquiry, to observe, question even that, question what you hold dearly to yourself, in the very questioning you will say, I don't know that that's true. I mean, you will have to see that somebody told you that. When you were younger, when you were older, it made you feel good to believe that, and because it made you feel good and alleviated your fear and sense of insecurity, even if for a moment, you held on to it, right? You said, I like that idea. It makes me feel good. Again, it just makes you feel good to believe that. So it gives you pleasure. So believing in something like that without really truly observing is only giving you pleasure, because it's taking away some of your suffering. Not all of it, though. And you don't 100% know what happens when you die, regardless of what you want to believe, and you're not 100% sure of anything, because beliefs are never 100% sure. The only things we're 100% sure of are facts and truth, which is what is happening now and what we can observe now. Whatever this soul is, I can't observe it. I can observe my behavior now. I can observe my memories, my thoughts, all of which are in the brain. So as far as I'm concerned, that goes away with the brain when the brain decays. I observe that. And without believing in some concept, I've also observed ending. And things end. Any conditioned thing ends. I mean, this physical world is made up of mass and energy, and I see it constantly shifting and changing form, and so there's no reason to believe that I persist any more than the energy and mass of any other thing. And it's a constant change and transformation and shift, and there's really no things. It's just a process of life, right? And then I see that, and then I don't anymore have this idea of clinging on to a permanent identity. And it's gone. And it's fine that it's gone, because it's the truth. And I don't care to know anything other than the truth. I don't want to believe something that's not true just to feel better, just to try to not have fear. But I will tell you, most people that I know who are fervently religious are still very afraid of living. So they may claim they have a belief that provides them with security, and they repeat it over and over again. Whatever mantra or phrase or prayer that will hopefully save them, but they know they're still suffering. They're still afraid. They're still feeling insecure. They're still angry. They're still violent. They still suffer from all the same sufferings because they just thought a belief could help them end their suffering, and it doesn't. Observe that in your life. Have all your sufferings ended? Are you free from fear? Are you free from anxiety? You should. I mean, I guess if you really believed what you say you believe, all those should be gone, right? That you know your life is here and you'll go to a happy place when it's over, whatever it is, heaven. So what are you afraid of? Why are you sad when someone passes away? Why do you cry at a funeral if they've gone to a better place? Because deep down inside, you have not transformed your consciousness. And you may think you have a belief that's helping you. It's not. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It's not really helping you. What will help you is to observe yourself and to not run away from the fear and not run away from the suffering and the anxiety and the depression that is still there, regardless of your belief. Adding a belief to your mind isn't fundamentally changing the nature of your mind. You need to fundamentally transform your consciousness for those things to not be bothersome anymore. Fear, you have to get to the root. All you've done is given yourself something you can distract yourself by, right? You've created a distraction, and as long as you focus and repeat that mantra or repeat your prayers, say 100 Hail Marys or however many Hail Fathers, or repeat your Buddhist mantra or whatever it is you do currently that numbs your mind down, takes your mind away from your day-to-day life. So like it's entertainment, right? If you go to church on a Sunday, it's the same as going to a sporting event. It's temporary entertainment, and when you go there, you can get elated, you can get, sing, you can chant, fly up in the air with lights. It's entertainment that takes you away from the problems of your day, in the same way that a football game or a basketball game takes you away temporarily, or alcohol, right, or any drug temporarily takes you away from your pain and misery, but then you're right back at it. You leave the church and now you're back in your life. You are back just as you were before. Now what? Now you're angry again, you're depressed again, you're sad again. If that's happening, then you're not truly free. And you need to see that you are truly free, or become free from all the past knowledge that is causing you suffering, in particular this pattern of the me. And that is to know yourself. To know yourself in that sense. And you can only do that, not through any system of ideas, only by paying attention to who you actually are right now, in this moment, not 1 second before, not 1 second later. Time has to end. There has to be an ending of time, which is an ending of thought, and then you are free to observe who and what you really are with no illusions. And in that is an end to suffering, which leads to passion, which leads to love and compassion for all living things. And you don't live in a small groove anymore. You are now free to expand to the entire universe. Okay, well, can't go further than the end of the universe, so I guess we'll end it there. Until next time.